this week I've been telling you guys stories that took place out on the island of Papua New Guinea, including with Elwin Martin, Haru Hariva, Amoa, Koivi, some of their children. I want to tell you a story today about a different island. Now, it's still in the South Pacific area, but this island is now called the island of Vanuatu. It's actually the chain of islands called Vanuatu. This chain of islands used to be called the New Hebrides. And one of the islands there, a very small island, was called Aniwa. Aniwa was only 3 miles around. It was a very small island. It was also a very flat island. It was basically just like a bump of coral rock and sand and dirt and trees out in the middle of the ocean. But it was big enough that people could raise their families on it, and they could farm sugarcane on it, and they could grow coconut palms on it, and that was how the simple people of Aniwa lived. Well, that plus a few other things that weren't as pleasant. All the people on Aniwa worshipped idols. They worshipped idols carved out of stone, idols carved out of wood. And they really believed the power of the idols, because not only did they have the idols to see, they could see the power of the idols by the things the idols could do. Now, the idols themselves didn't get up and move around, of course, but when these people would practice witchcraft and they would make sacrifices to the idols, they would sometimes see great things happen by the power of demons working through those idols. They really believed in those idols and the power they had. So then, one day, when a man named John Paton and his wife and their children arrived to the small island of Aniwa, the people didn't greet them very friendly, because John Paton was there to tell them about a God they couldn't see. He was trying to tell people stories about a God who lived up in heaven. What, heaven? Nothing lives up there. That's where the rain comes from. And he told them that then this God had a son who came down to earth and had died for them. Why would he even do that? And you can't even see a God who lives up in heaven. How can you believe any of these stories? This is ridiculous. Now, it would have been bad enough if the people of Aniwa had just laughed and pointed and gone, ha ha, you're ridiculous. But it was a little more serious than that for John Paton and his family, because you see, the people of Aniwa were also cannibals. Uh-oh, yeah, that's the reaction right there. And as you guys probably remember from the stories we told this week, cannibals have a source of food that none of the rest of us really do, and that is other people. Yes, so when strangers would show up, those were usually the best people that you could choose to eat if you were a cannibal, because you didn't want to eat your friends, you didn't want to eat your family, you wanted people you didn't know. Nobody knew John Paton and his family on this island. And so John Paton and his family faced a lot of danger. Their first couple of months there, they were threatened daily. There were people stalking them through the bush. There were people spying on them as they built their house just a little bit inland from the seashore. There were people sometimes throwing spears at them, and there were stories of spears being thrown from only a few feet away by experienced spear throwers, and the spear just turning in midair and going around John Paton. I wonder how that could have happened, huh? God, that's right. I think there was an angel there just flicking it aside. But they managed to survive long enough on that island that one of the chiefs, in fact, the oldest chief, and therefore the most respected and the most powerful chief on the island, by the name of Namake, became somewhat friendly to John. Now, I think Namake started off being friendly to John because he thought John was crazy. And according to their belief system on the island, if somebody was crazy, well, then you just kind of humor them, you know. They're obviously out of their mind. They do weird things. We're not gonna take advantage of that. That wouldn't be honorable for us to eat somebody who's crazy. So Namake managed to convince the other people, okay, don't. It's okay. He's crazy. Now the problem with that is, if you're a missionary, do you want people to think that you're crazy? No, because then anything you say, they're like, oh yeah, it's crazy talk again. Silly missionary. So now, at least the people weren't trying to kill them anymore, but now they didn't want to listen to the thing they had to say because they thought it was just all made up silliness by crazy people. Well, there was a problem facing John on the island, besides, of course, all these other ones I just listed for you. And this problem was where to get water from. Now, you might think, well, what do you mean? What's the big deal about getting water? Yeah, you could have a water tower, or, turn the faucet on, or, go out to the well and pump the handle, or go down to the river and... No, there were none of those things on the island of Aniwa. In fact, guys, there was barely any rain on Aniwa because, see, in order for rain to fall, one of the main effects to make rain to fall, you need to have some kind of tall object like a mountain or something, and as the clouds come by, they get kind of slowed down by the mountain and the air moving around, and so that causes them to linger, and then they can build up condensation and drop rain down. The island of Aniwa was flat. the tallest things on it were palm trees. Those didn't really catch a lot of clouds. So there was very little rain. And then here's the second problem. When the rain would fall, the island of Aniwa was made out of this coral limestone rock. Like the coral reefs. You've seen coral reefs maybe? Maybe you've swum in an ocean. Coral reefs have a lot of holes in them. The rock that made the island, it was under a layer of the sand and dirt on top of that rock. That rock was just a bunch of holes. It was like having an island made out of Swiss cheese. Any rain that fell and landed on the ground, it wouldn't really stay there and collect into ponds or maybe into lakes. Maybe you make some nice streams. It would just right into the ground. I'm going to need an assistant to come up and just have a little seat over in this corner if we could have somebody, please. The water would just right into the ground, like being sucked in by a big sponge. And so you couldn't even find water just on the ground to drink. If you did find water on the ground to drink, it would just be little puddles, and the puddles would grow mosquitoes and mosquito larvae and all sorts of other parasites that would cause diseases. So what did the people drink on this island? I mean, you need water to survive, don't you? Coconut water was one of the two main ways they got water. They would drink coconut water all the time. That's even what they would give to the babies. If a mother had a baby that was still nursing and the mother died, they would actually give the baby coconut water, and they would take the meat, that white slimy stuff on the inside of the coconut, and they would mash that up and feed it to the babies, and that's how they would grow. Coconut water, and there was one other way. What did I tell you that they grew on the island? Coconuts and? I said something else. Sugar cane. Sugar cane actually has liquid in it too. So they would chew sugar cane all day long. So that was how people survived for their water needs. But John Paton and his wife and their kids, they weren't accustomed to this, and they were really thirsty all the time. And it was a big problem. And John finally said, you know, I think we're going to need to try to dig a well. And his wife said, what do you know about digging wells? He said, absolutely nothing. John was not a scientist. He wasn't an engineer. He didn't know anything about how to do this, but he decided they needed to survive on the island of Aniwa. These people needed them, and they were going to need water in order to be able to stay there for those people. So he decided he was going to go and dig a well. Now, he went and talked to Namake first. Namake, he said to him, Namake, we are not getting enough water. Namake said, you wait. When the rain comes, there will be water. He says, yeah, but it can be weeks or months sometimes before rain comes. We need water, so I am going to dig a hole. And Namake looked at him. He said, I'm going to dig a hole deep down in the ground. Namake looked at him. He said, I'm going to dig a hole down deep enough that eventually we will find fresh water down there to drink. And Namake said, you're going to dig a hole and rain will come out of it? Rain comes from the sky. That's what they call fresh water. The only type of fresh water they knew was rain. So rain was fresh water. Rain comes from the sky. Rain does not come from the ground. Do not do this. He said, well, in my country, because John Paton was from Scotland, he said, in my country, we can dig wells, we can dig holes, and the water comes up from below. Oh, you are losing your head. You are losing your head. If you do this, this will guarantee, we will all know for sure, you are completely crazy, and the people will not have any chance of listening to these stories you try to tell. But John said, I need to do this. This is the only way to survive. John began thinking about it. What do I know about digging a well? I'm going to need some tools. What do I not know about digging a well? A lot of things. I don't know how to pick a place to dig a well. I don't know how deep I'm going to need to dig it. I don't know how I'm going to keep the walls from falling in on me. How am I going to get up and down this hole as it gets deeper and deeper? Now, what if, when I get to the bottom, biggest question, what if I do finally hit water and it's salt water? I mean, these kind of porous islands, made out of coral, the ocean is not just around the island. It can kind of be leaking in through tunnels and openings and getting under the island. What if I just dig all this time and I get down there and it's just salt water? But John took it before God in prayer, and he decided, this is what God wants me to do because he doesn't want me to leave this island. So I'm going to do it. So John got the tools, all the tools that he had that he thought could work. He got a pickaxe, he got a shovel, he got a regular cutting axe, he got a bucket, he got a ladder. And he went out and he looked around, and he pretty much just said, all right, Lord, show me where to dig. This looks good. And he walked over a few feet away from his house. And he began to dig. And almost immediately, a couple men from the natives stepped out from among the bushes and stood there watching him. And as he found out later, Namake had told his people, the Misi is going to do something silly. Misi. Misi was what they called missionary. It was their pidgin word for missionary. The Misi. Misi is going to do something silly. You keep an eye on him. Don't let him get too tired. And when he does get tired, then you can talk to him and convince him that he needs to stop. So that's what these men were there to do, to keep an eye on John and eventually try to convince him, what you're doing is silly. Why are you bothering to do this? John saw them and said, oh, good. Do you want to come help me? Can you come help me? They just stood there and watched him. Okay, John started digging. Got his axe out, started digging into the dirt and kind of the layer of gravel on the top. Hard work. Oh, by the way, how hot do you think it is in the New Hebrides in Vanuatu? It's always at least 90 degrees there. Hot, hot with the sun down on you all the time. Humid. And he began digging in the sunshine with no fresh water source that he could just easily get a nice cool drink of water from either, right? So he's doing all this work hoping to find water eventually, maybe in a few days, maybe in a few weeks. But in the meantime, he's just got to make do with warm coconut water. Dig, dig. And he gets a little further down, like to the height of his ankles. He looks over the men. Come help, this is not dangerous. We're not going to help. After digging for one full day and only getting down to barely up a little above his ankles, Missy John realized he was going to need to get some help somehow. So he went in the house and he looked in all of his boxes and his bins and his trunks of belongings, and he found he had a big collection in a leather bag, a big collection of nice English steel fish hooks. These people would love to get good fish hooks. They made fish hooks themselves out of coral. They would take coral or seashells and they would carve it to make some nice hooks. But these were really strong metal hooks. So he went outside the following day and he found some men gathered around waiting to see what crazy Missy was going to do. And he held up a fish hook and he said, I will make an offer. Any man who digs enough dirt to fill 3 buckets, I will give them 1 fish hook. There was a rush of men to the tools, and everyone grabbing and digging and fighting over, this is my bucket, because there was only 1 bucket. So they would take turns. One person would fill up a bucket, he would take it over here, and as soon as he would dump it, another person would grab it out of his hands and bring it over and dig. And they worked all day, and they worked all day and all day and all day for quite a few days, until they got down to they managed to get down 12 feet deep within just a few days. Great progress. John still had to be there helping all the time, guiding them what to do, making sure that they would dig the walls fairly straight. And then, after they hit 12 feet, the next morning he woke up and went out to find a real big problem. Half the wall of the well had caved in. And now the well was only about 9 feet deep instead of 12 feet deep. It was full of dirt again. And I was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to keep this from caving in again? Well, then Namakeh came stalking out of the underbrush with all of his men behind him. And Namakeh said, you must stop digging. Why? What's the big deal? You think it's just something silly. No. Because now we see that if you go down in there and the wall falls in on you, it will kill you. John said, yeah, but if it happens to me, it happens to me. None of you guys are going to have to worry about this. I can do this on my own. If you guys aren't going to help me, I will do it. No. Because then if you die, then the next time that the British send one ship around to check on you, because since John Paton was a missionary from Scotland, he was under the British Empire, and the British Empire would send ships around to check on the missionaries and different explorers and traders in the islands. The next time that they come to check on you, they will see, he has caused problems, he has killed himself, and then they will blame us, and then they will kill all of us. And John said, no, that wouldn't happen. No, please, just help me. No, you can't dig. I'm going to have to do this somehow, John said. So I will come up with a better way. So he began thinking on it, and the Lord kind of gave him some ideas, and he ended up coming up with a pulley system. He put a couple poles with a beam across. He was able to set up some pulleys, set a rope going down with a bucket, and then he said to the men, all right, I'm going to dig the walls a little differently, more of an angle instead of just straight up and down, so they won't cave in so easily. And then I will be the one going down there, and I will load up a bucket with dirt. And then I will give a signal ringing this bell, and you can pull the bucket with the rope, and that way we can get the dirt out. And the men said, no. Why not? We don't want to get close to the hole. He said, I'll make the rope really long. Okay. And so they all stood 20 feet away from the hole, and that's how close they would come. And when he would ring the bell, then they would pull on the rope, and the bucket would come up. They'd dump it out and send it back in. He made more progress, and he started using some boards, as whatever boards he could find from his house, to be able to kind of keep the edges of the well from crumbling in. And he had to trust the people not only to help him pull up the dirt, but he had to trust the people to help pull him up, because he didn't have a ladder long enough to get all the way down. So he started having to ride on the bucket rope down and up, hoping the people wouldn't decide to just leave the silly Missy down below. But he made more progress, and finally he got down to 30 feet. And by this point, the ground was starting to be a bit damp. He could tell when he would touch the ground, it was kind of wet. Not enough that there was like water gurgling out, but it was wettish ground. Have you ever been digging down by the beach? And you start digging in the sand, and then it starts to get kind of wet sand? That's what he was finding. He was so excited, but now he started wondering, is it going to be fresh water? What if it's salt water? What if I did all this and it's salt water? He went up and he announced to Namakeh, Namakeh, guess what? The ground is damp. I think tomorrow I'm going to get to water. And Namakeh said, you must stop. Stop now. So what now, Namakeh? We've got the wall shored up. Everything's okay. No. Because if you dig far enough to hit water, you will fall through the island into the ocean and the sharks will eat you. No, Namakeh, that's not how it works. There's water collected under the ground. Oh, your silly talk of rain from the ground. That does not work. He went back to work the next day. Before he went down, since he was pretty sure he was going to hit fresh water that day, or at least hit water that day, he took a jug and he stood by the edge of the well and he showed all the people. Now, many people had come gathering around hearing that he thought he was going to hit water today. And he showed them that he had an empty jug. He showed them nothing inside of it. Then he got on the bucket rope. The men let him down. He got down to 30 feet and he began digging. And he dug and he dug until he reached 34 feet and suddenly water started to come up through the ground. It was still pretty muddy, but he was so excited he didn't even care about the mud. He grabbed a handful and he tasted it, and it was fresh water. It was not salty, it was fresh. Praise the Lord. He dropped his knees in the water there. He thanked God for giving him that fresh water, and then he filled up the jug and he rang the bell, and the men pulled and pulled and pulled, and he came up to the top. He said, look, God has given me fresh water, rain from the ground, like I told you he would. And Namakeh came up to the jug. He took the jug. He shook it by his ear. It sounded like water. And then he poured a little bit into his hand, and he felt it. It felt like water. So then he poured some more in his hand, and he tasted it. And his eyes got big. He said, it is rain, rain from the ground. It is rain from the ground. God had answered John Paton's prayer. He said, and Namakeh said to Paton, how is it that rain comes from the ground? Paton said, because God is giving this to us as a sign that he exists. God is showing that he is rewarding the labor we all did. He's giving me an answer to prayer. He wants me to stay here and minister to you. Then John said, come on, all you villagers, go take a look. None of them will go close. They were all too scared to look down the well. He said, you can see it, the water's starting to come up. You'll see your reflection of the sky down in the well. They didn't want to look. Finally, the solution they came up with was that one villager went about 50 feet away, and he wrapped his arms around a tree. And then every villager afterwards hung on to him, and they made a line of villagers all the way to the edge of the well. And then the villager at the end would go, and then he would go to the end of the line, wrap himself around the tree, and the line would move down. And that way, each one of them, one at a time, looked down, saw the reflection, went, oh, and then it all kept on going. And now, Namakeh asked, what will happen with this rain in the ground? Is it like the rain in the sky? Will it just come and go? What happens if we want to drink it? Will you let us drink it? These are important questions, and John realized he had an opportunity here to show the love of God. He said, this rain, I believe, is going to always be here in the ground. It's not like the rain clouds that come by. And I believe that this is rain that you should be allowed to drink as well. Namakeh said, but you did all the work and paid all the workers. It is your water. It is your rain. And John said, no. This is a gift from God for all of us. We're all going to drink it. And when Namakeh and all the people heard this, they lined up in front of John and said, how can we help you now? They didn't want any fish hooks now. They didn't need any bribery now or begging now. They wanted to help. John said, well, we need to shore up the wall. It would be best if we could get like blocks of coral stone to put it there. And the people went and brought huge blocks of coral stone. Some of these blocks so big that 4 men were struggling to carry them. And then they would help him break them up into pieces. And John was going down, layering the wall, and he was getting really tired. This was hard work to do by himself. And the men said, we see now, it's safe. We'll go do this work for you. And they started even going down in the hole and helping to make it more secure. And they worked and worked until this well was stabilized. And do you know that well survived for over 50 years producing water there on the island of Aniwa? It was the only well on the island of Aniwa during a drought of 2 years when no rain fell. And that water saved the lives of everyone there. And that well was the only well that they ever were able to dig that produced fresh water, because the villagers said, well, now we've watched him dig a well. We know how to dig. We'll go dig wells for ourselves. They tried 7 times to dig wells in other parts of the island. And every time they either hit coral rock or they hit salt water. This was the only freshwater well that ever appeared in the island of Aniwa. And the men would say to themselves after they tried digging these other wells, we learned how to dig, but we have not learned how to pray like Missy yet. That's why his well made the water. But here's the most important part of the story. The next day after the well hit water, Namake asked permission from Missy to preach a sermon to the people. And he preached a sermon to them, telling them, we have laughed at Missy's stories. We have laughed at his ideas of an invisible God with a son who comes down to die for us. But we also laughed when he was digging a well. We laughed when he said that there would be rain from the ground, and there it is. So now we know, people. Now we know all his other stories are true. And therefore, we must burn our idols. Missy Paton had not asked him to say this. But he told the people, we must burn our idols. And the people went and brought their idols, and they burned them. And the ones they couldn't burn, they either dug holes and buried them, or they took the most important ones out into the ocean and dropped them off into the depths of the ocean so they would never be tempted to get them again. In John Paton's words, the sinking of that well and the finding of fresh water broke the back of the devil's grip on Aniwa that year. Now, the reason I told you this story is not just because it's an amazing story, but also to help you understand what Martin Luther was doing, guys. We're going to see another scene from Martin Luther's life here in a few minutes. And Martin had done what John Paton did. He did hard work that nobody else wanted to help him with. He dug in the Bible, finding things there that people had forgotten, finding instructions from God that people had forgotten. And then then Martin continued working when people started opposing him, telling him, stop, you should not be doing this. You're breaking our traditions. But John kept on going because he wanted to hit the fresh water of the 5 solas. You guys remember what we talked about? Faith alone, grace alone, Christ alone, the Bible alone, and all glory to God alone. Martin hit that well of fresh water. And because of what Martin did, all that hard work, he shared it with all of us, so that all of us can have that same idea of looking in the Bible, trusting Jesus only to show us what to believe. You can be a digger like John Paton and like Martin. You can look in the Bible, understand it, study it for yourselves. Even at this age, you can read it and understand it, and then you can follow what it says, and you will be someone who digs and hits wonderful supplies of fresh spiritual water to share with those around you. God bless you, kids.